Why in every single school anime ever is there like some dude who goes around like this in like every scene? I feel like this is like a staple of like anime that I've just started noticing. I watched Ghost Stories a few weeks ago and the main character made a joke about it. And I've just been noticing it ever since. There's always like a character that goes around like this who'll be like strutting along, walking with a girl or something, just like elbows up, and I feel like it's the most uncomfortable pose ever. Like, is this a thing in Japanese culture? Do like dudes do this? And if so, is it like the equivalent of like the frat boy, like fuck boy, like I don't know, like the fingers at the elbow pose? I don't know. I genuinely want to know if that's like a thing that just was made for anime or if it's like actually a thing in Japanese culture. Someone please answer me. Anyways, good evening gamers and welcome back to another episode of The War. That is the weekly anime recommendation, the show where I go out, I watch a frick ton of anime, I throw all the bad ones out, and I come back with one good recommendation for you, the viewer. Now the anime in question is of course The Way of the Househusband. It's an anime that came out in 2020 on Netflix, and it's sort of one of those new type of anime that marries the slice of life genre with comedy in a really unique and interesting way. I would sort of put it in the same category as Kaguya-sama or Uncle from Another World, or probably even Dress Up Darling, honestly. Any of those anime where it sort of takes the slice of life genre and it takes comedy and it sort of fuses them together using something unique, some third party element. For instance, like I say, Kaguya-sama uses sort of like the fighter game, like Mortal Kombat versus element and sort of the love slice of life genre, over dramatizing the fuck out of it and making it hilarious. Or like Uncle from Another World uses sort of the isekai tropes and brings that into the slice of life comedy elements. For Way of the Househusband, the premise is essentially the main character is Tatsu. He's an ex-mafia boss. He's an ex-yakuza. And he's fallen in love. He has a wife. And so now instead of doing all of his mafia stuff, he's doing cooking, he's doing the cleaning, he's doing all the good things a normal house husband would do, right? Except he hasn't dropped his mafia yakuza mannerisms. So every single interaction he has, whether it be with his wife, whether it be with his neighbors, whether it be with the attendant at the supermarket, he goes in just like he would to a yakuza confrontation. He goes in very serious, very whatever, you know, he dresses the same way he does in the like from the yakuza, right? It sort of brings in sort of like the crime, like over dramatized element into the slice of life comedy element, and it does it really, really well, and I think it's really funny. There is only really one joke in the whole show. Now, I know I said I like the comedy, but basically the whole comedy is the discomfort other characters face when confronted with Tatsu, right? So the jokes do get a little old. I don't think Way of the Househusband is really the show, like the kind of show that you can just binge like back to back to back episodes. I think it would get kind of old. How I watched it, I watched like one episode a week for for a couple weeks straight until I got through it, or probably one episode every other day or something. I spaced it out, right? Because if I watched episode after episode after episode, I'm pretty sure the singular joke would get really old. You know, I think if you sort of pace yourself, it does a good job of sort of staying original. There are some, I guess, kind of changes to the joke format, and you'll see what I'm talking about if you actually watch the show. It does get a little repetitive at times, and I feel like if you don't like that, and you're kind of used to that style of joke, it may not be for you as well. I don't know. I remember when I first started watching Way of the Househusband, I was really off-put by the animation at first. And what I mean by that is there's essentially no animation in the show, which is really weird because it's an anime, right? It's expected to be animated to a pretty high level. Anime is known for, you know, good animation, but there kind of isn't any. It's almost like watching a manga with like voices and like color. That's what it feels like for the first few episodes, and it takes a little while to get used to. Essentially, I'm gonna show an example of what I'm talking about, but the characters are sort of put on the screen and they're just kind of shaking around as they speak. It's kind of gross, honestly. Or you get used to it after like probably one episode or whatever. But it definitely is a bit disconcerting. So if you're a guy who likes, you know, animation, or a girl, I should probably say, if you're a guy or a girl who really likes animation, or wait, there are more than two genders. If you're a guy or a girl or something else that really likes the animation, then maybe it's not really for you, the show. So maybe skip this one. But there's some other elements that I'm going to talk about here in a second that really carry it and make me think it's really worth watching, even besides the animation. The best part of this show is the comedy, and I already mentioned that. It sort of follows the same like route as Kaguya-sama. If you watched Kaguya-sama and you really liked it, then you probably love Way of the Househusband, because the comedy of it is very much of the same element. It's like very over dramatized. Most of the comedy revolves around Tatsu, the main character, interacting with like other people, like people that are his neighbors or the shopkeepers or anybody he really talks to, and every single like conversation he has, the people are physically scared of him because he has tattoos, he looks like a Yakuza boss, and he speaks with a very serious, straightforward manner. Everyone's just like really scared of him and ends up like giving him stuff, or he ends up kind of getting away with like doing things that people normally wouldn't be able to get away with doing. It's really, really funny. It's a very original idea, and it's implemented very, very well in the show. They get the comedic timing perfectly. They get sort of like the tone and the feel just almost perfectly right. There was not a single episode that I was not like laughing my ass off. It's all just really, really well done. Another element of the show that I really love is beyond the comedy, there's a lot of very sweet, I'd say wholesome moments thrown into the show where like I find my heart melting. Like I'll be watching this show and there's a lot of like funny stuff going on, but then there'll be like a serious, deep, sort of heartfelt moment that's shared usually between, I'd say, Tatsu and his wife, but sometimes between some of the other characters, and like my heart just kind of melts a little. It's very sweet. You wouldn't exactly expect it. It's sort of like Kaguya-sama, where like, I keep comparing it to Kaguya-sama, I'm sorry, but it's kind of like Kaguya-sama where there'll be like a moment, it's like comedy, 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 and then there's like a moment where something really sweet happens and you just like pause and there's like super just deadpan serious, and then a joke comes in and you're just like laughing your ass off again. It does it really, really well. There's just so many things the show does really, really well. One other minor criticism of the show, I think I would say, is that there's not really a super well-defined backstory to like the characters and sort of the narration. There isn't like a narration that sort of follows episode by episode where you get like this story that progresses through. Sure, you do get Tatsu's backstory, like sort of through little glimpses of like how he met his wife, how he met other characters, what he was doing before the show started, yada yada yada. But there isn't really a super deep story. I guess what I'm saying is it ain't Berserk. But if you go in knowing that, I think it's fine. I think a lot of shows that exist solely for the purpose of entertainment, like for instance Saturday Night Live or like Monty Python, if you've ever seen that, oh boy, that's a funny show. If you've ever seen either of those shows, then you'll know that not every show has to have sort of a super deep underlying story to make it really good. It doesn't have to be Lord of the Rings, it doesn't have to be Dune, it doesn't have to be Berserk. It can just sort of exist in its own realm and you can still enjoy it. And I think if you go in knowing that and you go in not expecting to get a super big story, I think it almost increases your enjoyment a bit. Just don't go in expecting there to be a lot of depth because it's really not that deep. It's a dude cooking for his wife. That's the show, basically. Honestly, it's literally like Gordon Ramsay, like the prequel. Like it's like his backstory. Like if you told me this was a biopic of Gordon Ramsay, Japanese Gordon Ramsay, I would not be surprised by the amount of cooking this man does. It's kind of ridiculous. Okay, so that brings me to my review of the show. So in terms of characters, I'm gonna give it a 3 out of 5. Like the characters aren't super deep, but they do have elements to them. They are all very interesting. They all have sort of their own little quirk, and they're all pretty funny. There is a little bit of progression as you like go through the show. The characters do sort of change, and you do sort of see things happen with the characters. So I'm gonna give it a 3 out of 5. Pretty average, not great, not terrible. In terms of originality of story, I'm gonna give that a 5 out of 5. I know nowadays there's like Sakamoto Days, there are a couple other manga that have sort of the Yakuza comedy-esque type tropes to them, but I do think Way of the Househusband was one of the first. I think it did kind of pioneer that. So I'm gonna give this show a 5 out of 5 in terms of originality of story. Now I know there probably were some other of like the Yakuza comedy type of shows, but I hadn't heard of them, and if I haven't heard of them, they obviously don't exist. This is my show. I can say whatever the frick I want. So screw you if you're one of those people like, oh, this other show did. No. If I didn't hear of it, it doesn't exist. Thirdly, animation. I'm going to be kind of harsh. I'm going to give this a 2 out of 5 because the art style was still pretty good. But there kind of isn't any animation. And that's like my biggest criticism of the show. I think it could have been better. Honestly, I don't think not having animation really detracted from my enjoyment of the show. But it would have been nice if I felt like there was like a little bit of effort, you know, like maybe like on the same level as like Uncle from Another World or any of these other shows. If they just put a little bit of effort into the animation, I feel like it could have been just a bit better. I would have given it a 3 or a 4 out of 5 in terms of the art style and the animation, but whatever, that's fine. There really wasn't any anime cringe. I can think of a few scenes where there was like a little bit, but it didn't really detract from my enjoyment of the show. Like I said, again, this is like a Netflix show, and Netflix doesn't really stand for any like sus stuff unless it's just like graphic sex every scene. It's weird. I think Netflix is like okay with showing like full frontal nudity and graphic sex, but But when it comes to like a schoolgirl like the you know what I'm talking about. You know the anime sus shit I'm talking about. They like don't stand for that at all, but they're like willing to just like have like complete just full frontal nudity. Like I just if you watched last week's War, I talked about the new Cyberpunk Edge Runners show. And like they're literally full on sex scenes, but there's no anime cringe. There's no, far be it from them to put anime cringe in like their shows, but you know, they can just throw in full nudity, you know, that's totally fine, you know. But yeah, so I'd say that's a 5 out of 5. There wasn't really anything that bothered me in the show. Anyways, that's been my review of the show. I would highly recommend you watch it if you like Kaguya-sama, if you liked Uncle from Another World, if you liked Rent-A-Girlfriend, any of these shows that marry sort of the comedy slice of life element. If you're also not an animation hoe, I would highly recommend this show because there ain't any animation. But yeah, it was a good show. I enjoyed it. They have a lot of funny moments, a lot of touching moments. It's just a good show in general, and I think it's best enjoyed slowly, remember, so enjoy it like a 10-course meal. Don't just like tear through it. Just kind of enjoy it slowly, and I think it's the best. Anyways, thank you for watching, and like and subscribe. Please like and subscribe. I need it. And I'll see you in the next episode of War.